Hello and welcome to the Prospect Blueprint. This webcast is for prospects, coaches, and those who support those prospects so they best understand what it takes to get from one level to the other, what to embrace, and what to avoid to get to whatever that level may be. I'm Kelly Kleinman, and as always, my battery mate is Mr. Rick Dempsey, 24-year MLB vet and fan favorite with the Twins, Yankees, Orioles, Brewers, my Cleveland Indians, and the Dodgers, and the 1983 World Series MVP for the Baltimore Orioles. Hi, Rick. How you doing? It seems like a million years.
I'm good, Cal. You're right. It's been way too long, but, look what we got here.
I know.
Walter Beede. I mean, This guy is a baseball junkie and one of the most knowledgeable coaches and a person in recruiting that you're ever going to meet in your life. And, we have, like you say, interviewed so many college baseball coaches. This guy would be the guru of those baseball coaches because his passion for the game is what all of them put together have, and that's why I love talking to people like that who love the game.
Well, here we go. This is his intro. Roll the drums, please. The horns and the bugles. I do some great editing. You're going to love this, Walter. Today's guest is Walter Beede, founder and exec, head honcho at baseballprocess.com, and author of 12 books, mostly on baseball. I saw a couple on Halloween. I'm not sure what that was. Maybe you can explain later. And I quickly get the impression, and I really mean this, that he's the leading expert on baseball recruiting in the country, and that's not an exaggeration. His highlights as a student athlete include New England first team, all New England first team high school player, received a scholarship from Arizona State when they were really good, and was selected in the 13th round of the 1981 draft by the Chicago Cubs, an organization that I am a scout ball coach for here in Southern California. He's been a head coach at the high school level, American Legion Ball, National Travel Baseball, and the NCAA, of course, college level coaching. He has worked as a task force member for the prestigious Team USA program in beautiful Cary, North Carolina. He is the parent of two talented sons that competed and graduated at the college level. Walter has been through the recruiting process with both his sons, Kyle and Tyler. Kyle played for LSU, Eunice, and Alexandria, and Tyler played for the national champion Vanderbilt Commodores. I think we know who Vandy is. Tyler also holds the distinction of being the only New England player ever in the 53-year history of the MLB draft to be picked in the first round 2 times. He's been there. He's seen everything. He's done it all. He is Walter Beede. Walter, welcome.
I am honored to be here today and have been asked to be a guest, and I am extremely excited to be on the other side of the interview process and happy to discuss anything and everything with regard to baseball.
And our first batter is Mr. Rick Dempsey, let's do it officially, number 24, Rick Dempsey.
Thanks, Cal. Walter, thanks for joining us, man. This is quite a pleasure for me, too, because I really enjoy meeting people that have been through as much as you have been through and really understand the game. So first of all, I want to ask you, I know you've written a bunch of books, but tell us about the shift, because I'm assuming that it's going to deal with all the multiple changes from Little League to the big leagues that are happening in baseball. Tell us about that.
Well, I decided to undertake this project after speaking with a couple of major league scouts back in 2019, right prior to the COVID situation, where they kind of gave me some insight into the direction of the CBA. And so at the top of it, it started with the reduction, what I call opportunity or entry to professional baseball. The short season teams were largely the developmental stage or entry point into professional baseball, where you kind of caught your breath, you kind of learned the rules of engagement a little bit, and you started your way into A-ball and into AA and so forth. With the elimination of those short season teams, I could see that the model was clearly pushing the development into college baseball. And it just so happened it was kind of like a perfect storm, where we had the elimination of the short season teams, reduction from 40 rounds to 20 rounds in the Major League Draft, which obviously pushed a lot of student athletes into college. And then you had the perfect storm of national image and likeness, extra years of COVID, years of eligibility, as well as the transfer portal becoming very user-friendly with regard to multiple opportunities to laterally transfer. So I wanted to make sure parents understood what was really going on here, and that the narrative of travel baseball was changing without anybody, letting parents in on that. And so the purpose of the shift was nothing more than to let parents understand that this is going to affect all of baseball, all of youth baseball. For years, the narrative for travel baseball was, follow us. We've gotten a lot of boys into Division I schools and professional baseball. Well, now it's a game of musical chairs, and I wanted parents to understand that dynamic. So I figured I'd do my best to try and write a book that explained that in a simple form so parents would understand.
Walter, I know that what things you're going to say, but I'll ask this question anyway. In your mind, are these multiple changes within the game of baseball good for the game, or just good for the people that are trying to put themselves in a good, advantageous situation in the game? Maybe in the pocketbooks, you never know.
I'm gonna go with the latter there. When I was a kid, I don't know if you remember Mr. Dempsey, a gentleman by the name of Lenny Murillo. And Lenny was, he passed away, he was 98, but he was a major league scout for decades. And he used to always tell me, and this goes back into the early 80s, hey, if somebody has to put a quarter in my pants pocket for me to talk about baseball, we're doing it wrong. We're not passing the baton on. And so that always resonated with me. And then the whole thing with regard to the shift is the only people that are really making the decisions, it's all about the money. Where is the money coming from? And most of the money comes from parents that are 6 through about 13 years of age. And I could walk you through multiple scenarios that are now presenting themselves where we have large venture capitalist hedge fund entities that are buying into perfect games and PBRs, and they're kind of in disguise. I call it the wolf in sheep's clothing, that is essentially out here saying, oh, we're going to rank these guys. They're 8 years old. We're going to rank these teams 8U, 9U, and 10U. And everybody gets excited, and they're all stirring the pot. And I call it the snow globe of baseball. And you run it up, and it looks pretty, and all the fluff is going on. But then when you just settle down, all those snowflakes go to the bottom, and that's money that everybody at in the inner sanctum gets to collect and sweep into their pockets. And I feel adamant that something needs to change. And if I have to die on a hill, the hill I'm going to die on is bring back Little League, bring back Sandlot baseball, bring back Babe Ruth, Pony League, multiple age groups, 10 through 12-year-olds playing with and against each other, 13 and 15-year-olds. That's what the game looks like in high school. That's what it looks like in college. And I can promise you it looks like that in pro ball. But now I don't think a lot of parents understand it's a business model, not a developmental model.
Well, I've got a follow-up question to that. In fact, you touched on some of the points that I think this question will bring up, and that's how are we going to grow the game of baseball in those lower age groups so the delineation of fun versus business doesn't take place too early in a player's development. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. There's a game up in Northern California. He's trying to franchise it. I don't think he can. I think it's a tough franchise, but it's called Speedball.
Speedball, David. Yep.
Oh, you know David. Okay.
Yes.
There you go. Right. I worked with him a little bit. We did some stuff together about the last year around this time. It's like 4-on-4-on-4, and it's quick moving, but it keeps the younger players interested in the game, and they actually burn calories. And all of his reviews are 5 stars. What's your thought?
First of all, I love his passion, and I think anything that's helping gain entry for the younger student athletes, as well as keeping the game fun and engaging for younger athletes, I think that's great. I think that where we run into technical difficulties is anytime you have that new type of idea, people will look for scalability. Like, how do I scale that, and how do we get more student athletes, and where are we making money? Unfortunately, the latter part of that conversation, who and where are we making money? And with regard to David, I have pretty good rapport with the people in Williamsport, Steve Cleaner, and Danny Volt, and they're their thoughts are they want to get younger athletes into the game. So I think David has the right mindset. My thing is we have to convince parents they're not missing out on anything. Children that play baseball at 7, as long as they're laughing and having fun and learning, they're going to be okay. Nothing they do as a 6 through 12-year-old is going to be indicative of what they're capable of doing as teenagers or college athletes or professional athletes. Just let them be kids. Let them have fun. And guess what? They're going to fall. They're going to fail. They're going to strike out. They're going to make errors. But guess what? They learn. They learn from those moments. So David is onto something. My thing is we have to attach some form of, that 3 to 6-year-old grouping, and then the 7 to 9-year-old grouping, and then that 10 to 12-year-old grouping within his concept, so that we're just getting children moving through the ladder, so to speak, of youth baseball. That's what we're missing. That's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your story with your boys. What stages of development did you put your boys through, since there's been so much family success in that particular process? And with that caveat that everyone's journey is unique, but this is your story. What is it?
Well, this is going to be boring as heck, so I apologize in advance. I grew up in a city, Lynn, Massachusetts, and it was a suburb of Boston. And we were fortunate that Tony C., Dwight Evans, they all lived around in our, Carl Yastrzemski, Rico Petroselli, they all lived in our area. And we played a lot of sandlot pickup baseball. And, as a dad, I always felt that being outside and being in a playground environment and being competitive, whether it was we would put up a bunch of, Coca-Cola cans when we were kids or bottles, and we try to knock them off. And I did the same thing with my boys. I really didn't, deviate too far. We went to the ballpark. I used to say to look, every Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to be there as a supervisor, the supervisor. I'm not an umpire. I'm not going to be a coach. And all I want to do is we'll create games. So, we'd put a trash bucket at home plate. And if you could, throw the ball into the trash bucket, it was a competitive environment. If we had 3 guys, it was a good game. If we had like 7 or 8 guys, we'd form a little team 4-on-4. You can't hit the ball to right field, or you can't pull the ball to left field. Yeah. My boys did that. And fortunately for them, I was always involved. I played until I was 39. Nowhere near. I played what they call Stan Musial ball. We went to Michigan every year and, over 30 league. And then once I got done playing and I was in the midst of my college coaching career, my boys would come to watch us practice. And I used to always tell them, this wasn't little boy baseball. If you put yourself between those lines, here's what happens. They're all going to play catch with you as if you were a teammate. If you are out in the field and you're fielding ground balls, you better be ready. They're coming in hot. Get out of the way or go to left field. So they saw the game. They were able to see the movements of how these players moved and how they went about their practice habits. And I will tell you that at no time, and this is not an embellishment or an exaggeration, my boys never took lessons. They never played travel baseball until the ages of 14 and 15, when it became evident to me as a college coach, when my recruiting, that was the direction the game was headed for the above average or more the intense baseball player, student athlete. And so that's when they started, was 14 or 15. If you want to know the magic, they played football, basketball, hockey, soccer, baseball. When it was August, it was football season. When it was, December, it was basketball or hockey season. When it was March, it was baseball season. Now, I didn't push any sport at any time. And we used to get a soccer coach that would say to my youngest son, if he doesn't play spring soccer, he can't play with us in the fall. Well, I'm sorry, but, it's baseball season. So, we've become conditioned to be 12 months a year baseball. And I get it. The warm weather climate, cities and towns and states can do that. But at the same time, I don't think parents understand. Children get one childhood. They get that one time in their life where they fall down, they make silly decisions, they say silly things, but they watch older peers how they move, and they emulate those peers. And that's what makes athletes, they're driven. I can tell you right now, Tony Calignaro, I think was just an absolute, he was a god. He was an Adonis. But if he spoke, he told me when I was maybe 9, listen, kid, squeeze a tennis ball. Everywhere you go, carry a tennis ball. I never walked anywhere without a tennis ball after that. My point is they were people that you looked up to because you had a love and a passion for the sport. And it's not easy. The sport is not easy. We try to tell students, oh, you struck out 3 times. Well, come in and take a lesson for 30 minutes and you're going to be good as new. That's not how baseball works. It's an ebb and a flow, and you fight your way through it. You work your way through it. And it's a mental discipline and toughness that you learn as a kid. And I just think my boys were around the game at a higher level at a younger age, and it kind of stuck with them. I think that's the simplest thing.
Walter, you made some really great points. I mean, I played against all those guys you're talking about. And, at that era of my professional career, I couldn't wait to hear all the things that those kind of players had to say, because I knew they were pushing me in the right direction. And I was so hungry from the time I was 19-year-old playing my first major league game. All I wanted to do was listen to the guys like Jim Cott, Harmon Killebrew, and guys like that you're talking about. Whatever they would say that would help me be a little bit better and help me compete against players who were better than I was at that time. And it really meant a lot to me, and it's probably what kept me in the game for 27 years as a player. So I totally understand where you're coming from. So anyway, let's get back to where you were. I want to find out what your take on the individual showcases and the organizations like Perfect Game and Showball and what they put on. What is it really worth at that time to analyze a kid that's only 13 years old? I totally agree with what you were saying.
Well, I have some strong opinions, much to the dismay of a few people that are within those organizations. I'm all about a capitalistic society and businesses, and if there's demand and you have the business, I give you a golf clap. But my thing with parents in those types of organizations, specifically PBR and Perfect Game, there are some really good people within those organizations that have played at the game's highest levels. But I think we give a false sense of security to parents and younger student athletes that here, simply show up and participate here, and a college coach will see you and you will get recruited. It doesn't work that way. And the videos of you getting a double against a guy that might not be throwing as hard or as competitive as a coach may want. Okay, well, that's a great moment as a 13-year-old, but it's not the pathway to playing the game at its highest levels when we start to face the caliber of competition where it's men playing against men, being coached by men and umpired by men. It's not like it's little boy, oh, you didn't get, let's do that again. No, it doesn't work that way. The showcase environment, I don't know if you guys have watched Yellowstone. I just started to get into it, but it's a cattle herd mentality where we're just going to herd all these guys into the chute. They're going to get into this big corral. Everybody's going to showcase, and then we'll just hope somebody sees me, and then I go on my way. I think it's more of an exposed versus exposure. And that's for the majority. It's not for everybody. And so when I talk with parents, I always tell them, if you said to 1,000 14-year-old boys that said, I want to be a Major League Baseball player, between 1 and 5 of those boys might become a Major League Baseball player. The others massively leave after high school. The rest end up leaving after college. And then there's probably out of those, maybe 10 play professionally, and 1 to 5 may get a cup of coffee. And so if we're all worried about the destination and we're not focused on the journey, and to me, that's the biggest issue. We preach destination to parents and student athletes instead of development in the journey. In other words, if I said to you, you're going to go climb Mount Everest. Okay, well, I know you want to get to the top, but do you know what it's going to take for you to get to the top? Are you prepared where others have failed and, in some cases their lives were given and sacrificed? I'm not equating that to baseball, but my point is the destination should not be what we are discussing with 6 through 15 or 16-year-olds. What we should be discussing is, hey, let's go throw a ball off of a wall for an hour and we'll get a lot of reps because repetition equals retention. Nobody wants to catch bullpens anymore. I was accused of being mean because I would say to a 15-year-old, we're going to go catch guys in college. What do you mean? He's going to hurt his hand. If we're not learning the craft of how to receive and present a baseball, all these guys want to do a catching lesson and they want to put a ball under a kid's glove and they just want to do this for an hour. I'm like, that's not how the game is. The game is not going to be everything soft serve at your kneecap. It's going to be balls in the dirt. It's balls off your thigh. You got to catch bullpens. And then, to answer your question, Mr. Dempsey, my opinion is it's a false sense of advertising that showcases lessons in these tournaments that do these 4-game, minimum, and then 5 games on a Sunday for a trophy. We're killing kids. We're just killing them. Nobody can have a pitching staff at 12 years old where they're going to roll 5 guys out, for 6 innings on a Sunday. So I just think we're doing it backwards.
Well, I agreed with you a couple of times already, but I also agree with this too, that now what they're teaching at the major league level is filtering down to the minor league level and then into amateur baseball at the same time. Parents are getting stuck in the middle because they're not advising their kids like you would have advised your own sons. They're not advising their children on doing the right things. You have to have a solid foundation first. So parents, they make mistakes. And what are some of the biggest mistakes you think the parents are making right now? Because I know for a fact they're not advising them the right way.
My thing is here's the big thing for me. Children never want to disappoint their parents. So if you say, hey, we're going to go do a lesson today, more than likely your child is going to say, okay, we're going to go do a lesson. And in my opinion, we're trying to teach children calculus before they have a basic math understanding as it pertains to the sport of baseball. And so, everybody wants to throw around this proprietary, they're disseminating these 50-cent words, I call them, and we all want to take, this is my guy, and I taught him how to. Here's the deal. Hitting's been going on a bazillion years. If I took Rod Carew, Sandahara O, George Brett, Dwight Evans, Collier Skremsky, and we're going up and down, and guys are leaning back. Yeah, the deal. They're all swinging the bat to do one thing, and that's to hurt a baseball. Nobody's trying to go up to the plate and drop a tank every AB. They're trying to square up a baseball, and they have different styles, but at the end of the day, they're all getting to the same point. So my point is, we want to be in a hurry as parents and teachers to see our children hit a ball 300 feet before they're able to make consistent ball strike. Contact. Let's worry about hitting skill and ball strike before we start talking about, hey, I have an exit velocity of this and my swing speed is that, my barrel speed is this. And I just think we're trying so hard to apply technology, and we're all trying to take proprietary credit for a sport that has been going on for well over a century, that many have been successful at, but most are in that, I tell parents all the time, some of the best major leaguers were lifetime 250 hitters. I said, I want you to think about that for 1 second. 250. That means every time, every 10 at-bats, they're only getting a knock every 7, every 2 out of 10 times, 3 out of 10 times. And you're trying to tell me that your son's going to be a 400 hitter in college, but he's only 8 years old. Let's slow it down. Let's have the kids. I want to know that children have a favorite team. I want to know that they have a favorite player. I want to know that they know who Nolan Ryan is. They want to know who, Ken Griffey Jr. is. We're losing the history of the game for just this whole purpose of, I got to get to college. I got to get to pro ball. I got to hit 400. I got to throw 95. Okay, well, let's remember how we all got here and what are we going to take away from those people and what are we passing it for? The game is a shell, as you mentioned, Kelly, is a shell of itself. I once had a parent tell me, I spent an hour, didn't get paid a penny, but a young man was having trouble bunting. I showed the young man how to hold the bat and what the purpose of bunting was. He was a left-handed hitter. I got scolded. My son doesn't need to know how to bunt. That's an automatic out. Haven't you ever listened to Theo and all these guys talking about the percentages of putting a bunt? Somewhere in the line of duty, your son is going to be required to put a bunt down. And if he can, he'll stay in the lineup. And if he can't, chances are he won't play at the higher levels. But yet we don't talk about that because it's not sexy. We can't sell bunting. We can't sell moving runners over. We can't sell a shutdown inning after your team just put a crooked number up. We can't sell that because it's not glamorous. It's not what's going to get you in front of the social media icons.
Yeah. Points well taken. Let's shift to the portal. Again, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but with the advent of the portal, I call it the Twilight Zone. How do you see that altering the path of not only recruiters, but the recruit as well? Is the portal a boon for JUCO, D2s and D3s who now have access to more players in need of homes? Or is it, and it could be both, the end of days for thousands who enter, never to be seen again?
So here's the reality is the baseball is a business at the college and professional level. We call it roster management, roster manipulation, call it what you want. If you just take fall baseball for what it is, it's no different than spring training at the professional level. You get to that level, you must have some skill sets, but if you're not performing or you're not up to your capabilities, you're going to get pushed to the side and somebody else comes in and takes your place. The transfer portal now is an extension of the world that has been created by travel baseball. So parents and student athletes looked at travel baseball as, what's my return on investment? Hey, I'm a customer. I'm paying. I want customer service. And if I'm not going to be the starting catcher or shortstop, I'm just going to go play for a team where I can be the starting shortstop. So we've created this monster of return on investment. And so now we go into college baseball. And, the NCAA is, and rightfully so, I think, because it's been coaching dominant as opposed to player dominant. The NCAA is basically looking at it as, we want the players to have as much opportunity as they can. So if SEC Team 1 doesn't want that student athlete, but they can go down to NAIA school and they can go play for Georgia Gwinnett, or they can go to Division III and get an education, let's let them do it. But in reality, what we've done now is we've added a free agency component to college baseball. It's as cut and dry as that. There's not a college coach in the country, and I respect each and every one of these guys. They need to win. They want to win. They're paid to put the best team on the between the lines. And if all of a sudden you're missing your Friday starter, and somebody from a mid-major school is, hey, I'd like to transfer, and I throw 90. Look at the young man from Air Force. I mean, that kid's a dude. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick. He knows he's not going into the Air Force with that kind of ability. Hey, let me go get some name, image, and likeness money at LSU, and I'm going to be a top 5 draft pick. I'm going to make all kinds of money. So let me transfer out of Air Force and do a lateral transfer to LSU. The young man from Georgia Southern, he's at a mid-major, and now he's in the SEC. It's the game of the who has and who can get versus the who will never be able to get and who doesn't have the ability to keep those kids in the school.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the NIL. I would think the colleges might say, look, we've got, because it's the NIL is clearly going to trickle into baseball. It already has started. We've kind of identified that on the show before. But I would think that, and this is not the question, but it's kind of a point, that if I'm guaranteed NIL money, I'm more likely to stick with a program. And we mentioned the SEC. They had 128 kids at the portal last spring in June. 128, and there was a mad scramble for SEC guys. Like those guys, the position players, are any better than the hundreds of other players who just don't get seen or didn't get picked by those SEC teams who are hoarding recruits. Here's the question. Is there a better way for college recruiters to recruit? And I literally go through every D1 roster. I see 2 to 3 good hitters, maybe 1 or 2, 3 guys teetering around 300, between 275 and 3, 2 to 3 low 200 hitters, and a couple others that can't even hit their weight. what recruiting biases or shortcomings do coaches have that perpetuate this kind of mediocrity, because it can't always be funding or school costs?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the arms. Youth baseball made a concerted effort, probably about 15 years ago. I told the story before. Tyler got cut from Team USA. He'd go into tournaments. He'd have 10 punches, 1 walk, 3 hits. Other guys threw 95. He threw 89, 92. You don't throw hard enough. And so they made this concerted effort to just develop these superhuman throwers that are in the 95, 98. I challenge you to go to any SEC game on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Arm after arm after arm that's coming out of that bullpen everybody's throwing 95. If you're not throwing 95, you're not in the SEC. So hitting is really tough. But we really have given a false narrative with regard to college recruiting, because we've taken away the high school coach. My opinion, we've made everybody think, okay, it's the travel ball coach. He's got all the connections. But I always ask parents, the travel ball coaches, for the most part, are not developing your children. They're collecting good players after the age of 14. They're basically going around different teams and say, oh, that guy's really good. Let's get him on our team. So they're doing the same thing that college coaches are. I think if we went back in time and we said, what's the one thing that has hurt the game the most? It is the age-by-age increments of youth baseball. We create a false sense of, I'm really good. I'm a good 12-year-old. And then I'm going to play 13U, and then I'm going to play 14U. Well, when I was 13, I had to face a kid that was 15, and he was throwing absolute cheese, and I had to learn, look, this guy is going to throw me something middle away. I'm just looking to put a barrel on this thing and drive this thing into right center, but I just got to put a barrel on it. But now we don't allow children to face that high level of competition until they get into that college age group, and they're not prepared to be challenged offensively. They don't know how to run bases. They don't have instincts. They don't know how to move runners around. Now, I'm talking collectively. Are there student athletes that do? Yes. But we glamorize guys that have, home runs in college. We don't talk about the guy hitting 320 and he's the shortstop or the third, the second baseman, and he's putting bats on balls. He's moving guys around. He's got 2-strike contact percentages. We don't talk about those things. And it all comes back to college coaches. They basically go to big tournaments every summer, West Coast in Arizona, East Coast in Georgia. They look around, they find the stallions, they saddle up, and they basically say, okay, when you come into our campus, you better be ready. There's not a lot of developmental time in college baseball anymore. And that is just a fact. You have to be ready when you're a freshman, regardless of the level of college, to be competing versus men. And that does not happen at the youth levels.
Let me throw something out there, Rick, before you go. Just a curiosity, because it keeps coming down to, actually right before you get into that, because we talked to, actually one of my questions is going to be about high school kids. I'm gonna back off. I'm gonna edit this part out. Rick, go ahead and ask your questions, and I'll bring it back up when it's my turn.
All right, Walter. Let's take a step back to these high school coaches. What should their role be in helping the talented players on their team get recruited to the college level?
I think a lot of high school coaches are disrespected or presumed to be unimportant to the process, particularly by parents. I don't think student athletes necessarily feel that way. The big thing is that a high school coach, typically, if they're a teacher within the school or maybe a coach of a different sport, they see that student athlete in all aspects of their daily activities over a period of 3 to 4 years. And I think college coaches have become accustomed to turning that recruiting dynamic over to travel coaches. And I think I don't want to say disrespected the high school coaches, but I think we've kind of lessened their role. And in my opinion, like I was taught, we had Brian O'Connor on last night. They love talking to high school coaches. Talk to me about when he's in the hallways, in the cafeteria. What's he like when he's the sixth man on the basketball team? High school coaches, I think if they were more involved and engaged with regards to listen, I'm going to send out a list. These are the guys that I feel, in my opinion, have the ability to play at the college level. And I'm going to kind of, work with a few guys locally. If you aspire to talk to anybody else, give them my name or let me reach out to them via email. I think there needs to be more of a dialogue between parent, student athlete, and high school coach that expresses their desire to the high school coach. Could you reach out to these coaches and kind of share, your thoughts and feelings as it relates to, our son's ability to play at that level? But I also know that in the world we live in today, if you're not giving those glowing recommendations, if you're not pounding the pavement saying that Jimmy's the best shortstop I've ever had, well, then the athletic director gets involved. So I think a lot of high school coaches, they kind of walk that fine line of, I enjoy coaching. I don't want to get too far deep into this because I'll alienate a certain segment of my team. So I'm trying to be all things to everyone as opposed to just working with the kids that want to go to high school. So we've put the high school coach in a really difficult environment with regard to baseball at the youth level, in my opinion.
Oh.
No, it's your turn.
What's that? Oh. All right. Well, Coach, we just talked about the high school guys.
Yep.
In your mind, you've got a tremendous knowledge of what goes on up there. What makes a great college coach? We've had some of the greatest coaches on here, and the one thing I've noticed about all of them, they have a tremendous passion and knowledge of the game, but they don't win. Some of them don't win. Are those kind of the guys that you're talking about here, that if they don't win, it doesn't mean that they're not good baseball coaches, and it might just mean that they have to spend a little more time developing their own players. So,
well, I think college baseball now has become what are we doing today? What are we doing today and tomorrow? I don't really care about yesterday. Yeah, great, you have been a good coach, but what are we doing now? How come we're not getting these players? How come we're not getting this caliber of player? And it's all about facilities, amenities, schedule, et cetera, et cetera. I think the coaches that understand the value of the position, meaning, in my opinion, it's the final frontier for every young man that plays a college sport, meaning this is the final 3 or 4 years that you are going to be in an environment that is a collective unit working towards the same goal. And you're going to deal with adversity. You're going to deal with failure. You're going to deal with success. We're learning how to be better men, better potential spouses, better potential parents, better potential employees in the workforce or business owners. And it's a lot bigger than just the sport of baseball. But I really feel that universities almost across the country, with regard to the sport of baseball, it's a forgotten sport. It's not a money revenue generating sport. It's getting bigger. It's getting better, but nobody's paying a lot of money to come and watch us. Nobody's really tailgating. And so there's a little bit of an indifference within the athletic department and the university as a whole. And if you're doing well and you're playing 500 baseball, okay, great. But the minute you start to have that really downward trend, and I've seen a lot of guys, Rick Jones at Tulane comes to mind, guys that ran a tremendous program and they were in the College World Series, and then an act of nature like Katrina, the hurricane, and suddenly Tulane's underwater for 2 years, and then they can't regather that steam that Rick had created, and then all of a sudden, Rick, you've had your day, and we have to move into the next chapter, I guess. And so college baseball now, I have Division III coaches, and I was a Division III coach, so I get it. They're not even after the junior college baseball is not your grandfather's junior college baseball. Your Division III coaches like Cortland State, Ithaca. I could go on. Eastern Connecticut. This is a great way to sum this up. Eastern Connecticut for years. Bill Halliwadi was the head coach there decades, and Andy Blaylock was the head coach at UConn, and they had a deal. Andy Blaylock would recruit the guys into UConn, and the guys that didn't work out in the fall went down to Eastern Connecticut and played Division III baseball. And Porky Rivera was at New Haven. So it was like a little fraternity. They don't do that anymore. Nobody does that anymore. And so it's not like we're helping our guys out. It's a highly competitive. They get in the portal. They're fighting for guys. But, Kelly, as you alluded to, a lot of those kids in the portal are like yesterday's news. and they want the latest and greatest that might be coming out of a JUCO or a post-grad school. And so, in my opinion, we don't have enough of the Ron Polks and Coach Dado and Coach Stevenson and Coach Gustafson, these people that were around the game. My God, Augie Garrido in today's world, he'd be run up a flagpole and hung by his toes because he used a 4-letter word that was inappropriate. But I guarantee you, if you go and ask anybody that played for him, they would go back and do that all over again and twice on Sunday. So college coaches have to walk this fine line at the institutional level. And then obviously in a world of social media where every move is micromanaged by the alums. And unfortunately, baseball is one of those, you got to do it today. We got to do it today. This kid didn't work out. Get rid of him. Let's bring in the kid from this college and that college. And some guys do that better than others. Some guys are what I call the Ron Frasers of yesterday, the promoters, the marketers, those kind of guys.
It's amazing whenever you bring something up. It's something that Rick or I have already talked about, or I was just thinking and it came out of you. 100%. I'm going to talk to you after this call, by the way. Let's talk about what advice you might have for high school kids looking to get into college baseball. It's a field bloated with recruits. You talked about JUCO. That's a whole nother situation. Of course, those players have maybe 2 years left and they're less likely to jump into a portal. What options should high school players look at? Should they go to JUCO? Is this the perfect segue for them?
Well, my thing is I've always been a big believer as a parent and as a coach, trading athletic ability for academic excellence. Now, as a Division III coach, I would recruit guys that were kind of in a tough academic standing coming out of high school, and I would kind of get them to understand, let's use baseball as a way of getting a degree. And I will tell you that I signed and played baseball. Coach Brock literally told me, you made the worst decision of your life. And that resonated with me as a player and then as a dad. And I always try to tell athletes, baseball has a finite time period. Education does not. And whether your degree, we could argue for days on end about which college has a more valuable degree. At the end of the day, a future employer is looking at your degree and saying, this was somebody who was dedicated, showed up, was accountable, attained a degree, put the work and time into it. At least that's the perception. And so when I tell parents now, don't look at the golden ring. Professional baseball is not what you think it is. If your son is in AA, and I'm just telling you, the bus rides are not glamorous. The pay is about $7,000 for 5 months. You're not living the high life. It's not where you want your son to be for an extended period of time. Is it good part for a year or two? Yes, but not to make a career out of being in AA or trips. And so if I could say to parents right now, your plan should be, don't worry about the destination until we get to 14 or 15. When we get to 15, we'll start to talk about it. When he gets his license, we'll start to create a plan. And so from I always tell parents from 1st grade to 8th grade, just go have fun, learn the game, learn as much about it as you can. Once you get to 8th grade, 7th grade, it's strength, it's size, strength plays, strength is the foundation. And if you have the strength and then you have the skill set, we can now begin to say, okay, we're going to get into high school. We'll start talking about college. But Major League Baseball has all but come out and said, the window to get into our university, for lack of a better term, it used to be like this. Well, now it's like this if you're from the United States. We have 30% Latin American players that are on 40-man rosters on 30 Major League teams. So if we take 30%, African Americans are now represent less than 8% of Major League Baseball or Major League Baseball rosters, 40-man and so forth. And you look at the other athletes, we now have an Asian influence. It's older. We're having these roster manipulations at the Major League level for service time. So kids aren't getting to the big leagues unless they're these elite talents of Tatis and so forth. So my point is, parents, your plan, use the game for as long as you can to get the end result, which is that college degree. And if you have the ability to play professional baseball, that's icing on the cake. But if you don't, you know that you played for as long as you could. You got a degree. You played with teammates. You had a great college experience socially, academically. You lived the life as a student before you had to go become, a real, breadwinning kind of member of the real world, I call it. And so I tell parents, I lost my parents when I was 6. My dad died when I was 16. I had my own apartment, literally my own apartment as a junior and senior in high school. And when you don't understand what it's like to, in today's world, cell phone bill, car bill, gas, food, you look at all the money that has to go out there. I'm considered an educated man, but you bet your rear end I made sure my boys were not considered uneducated. I don't care what you think of them athletically, but I can tell you they both have college degrees, and they both have degrees because of the sport of baseball. That's the end game. The game uses you. You as parents and student athletes need to use the game to maximize your future.
Outstanding. Well, that calls into effect this question. Do you think it's time to consider a new professional baseball league, one that addresses the ills and mismanagement of the current league? Because the league is sick right now. It doesn't represent the game at its greatest. And that's my opinion. I think that's everyone's opinion here.
Not only do I think it would be wildly successful, and again, when I talk about the past, I understand we cannot go backwards. We cannot rewind. But if we look at barnstorming and we look at minor league baseball, what was the success behind it? And that was because we took the sport and we put it into areas where they didn't have access to Major League Baseball. And so if we look at minor league hockey, and in some cases, I remember being in Appleton, Wisconsin during the 4th of July for a minor league baseball game. My gosh, the flags are waving, the smell of barbecue, and everybody's going to the ballpark. So to me, if you look around and I can tell you this definitively, there are a lot of college summer baseball leagues. It used to just be the Cape Cod League. Then they created the New England College Baseball League. Then they created the Futures League, and then the Northwoods League, and then the Pacific Coast League, and then the Florida League. Why do we think there are all these college summer leagues? And the answer is because we're overloaded at the end with college players that are looking for a place to play. And, oh, by the way, they're profitable. Why? Because people want to watch good baseball or advanced level baseball at a reasonable cost. So if you took some of these former minor league, what I call palatial palaces like they have in Richmond, Virginia, there's a lot of minor league fields that are sitting that aren't used to their fullest capacity. And you formed the Player Development Baseball League. And you just sold that as a minor league system. You would be packed. And I'm talking about, I don't know if you remember back in the days when Kurt Russell's dad ran the team up in Portland. And he was bringing in guys that were bartenders, and Jim Bouton was in his, I think, late 30s. I'm telling you, there's a market for that. Bartolo Colon could come out and make $100,000 to $200,000 a year. He'd love it, and he'd be pitching, and people would come to watch that. There is definitely an opportunity to have a wildly successful professional baseball league that would, I don't want to say it would compete with Major League Baseball, but it sure as heck. Look at the Savannah Bananas. Have you ever done any interviews with Coach Viro or any of those guys?
No.
Oh, my goodness. They pack ballparks all across the country. Pack. Yeah. And I'm talking their social media following. It answers your question. What do they focus on? Fun, but they're competitive. Like, you go to one of their games. It's not like you're watching a Harlem Globetrotters game against the Washington Generals. They're playing competitive baseball, and every once in a while they sprinkle in, what I call a flower puff play. But it's good baseball, and they pay those guys, and they travel like rock stars. So the Savannah Bananas have literally said, like, if I said to Mr. Dempsey, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to get Nolan Ryan, we're going to go out and get some guys that have been around the game. And here's the deal. These are our rules, and they're the rules of yesterday. The game will self-police itself. We're not going to do robot umpires. We're not going to do instant replay. We're not going to do any of this stuff. We're going to play the game, and we're going to go find guys that have that will and that passion to play post-college, or maybe they didn't go to college after JUCO. You could put together a tremendous league by just calling it the PBDL, the Player Development League. And I guarantee you it would be like the ABA and the NBA. At a certain point, Major League Baseball would have to come and say, okay, this could be our G League like the NBA has. It could be wildly successful.
Yeah, that's one of my thoughts, is that it could definitely be successful. You know, when I think of the Savannah Bananas, I think of guys like Max Patkin, you know, back in the day, who was unbelievably hysterical. He had those machinations, like, you know,
oh yeah,
Jim Carrey. His neck was so long, and he was hysterical. And there's a lot they could do. That is my thought as well. Rick, what do you think?
Well, there's so much, you know, all the guys that Walter's talking about. I played with those guys, and I learned from those guys, and I learned from the better players of my era. And there's so much of the game when you play for guys like Billy Martin, Earl Weaver, and Tommy Lasorda. You know, Lasorda was a lot different from the Martin and Earl Weaver. They demanded that players understand the game and use their heads out there during the course of their game. You know, you talk about instincts, and not very many good instincts at the major league level, but instincts is actually not something you're just born with, but it's something that you think about doing before it happens. And then when that opportunity presents itself, you react. And then all of a sudden, everybody says he's got great instincts. But I look at so many parts of the game. I caught so many games that, you know, it's in my mind exactly what's going to happen when certain things are coming during the course of a ball game. You're thinking ahead. And, you know, they don't even think about the hit and run anymore, but there are some times when it should be used, you know, and the whole idea is to get that second baseman to break up the middle of the shortstop to do, and you open up the right side and the guy hits behind him. You know, I had 6 at-bats my first year in the major leagues, and Billy Martin gave me the hit and run 3 times, and I got 2 hits. And the other one, it accomplished it. Its reason to do it was to get a guy into scoring position. But I had back control. And so my first 5 or 6 years at that level, at the major league level, and I was a hell of a hitter. But when I went to Baltimore, Earl Weaver wanted me to stand on top of home plate and hit the ball down the left field line. He said, if you can do that for me and hit a few home runs, I don't care about your batting average. He says, you'll catch every day. That's all I needed to hear. But from a guy that was that smart about Major League Baseball and knowing how to put a lineup together, when to play this guy, when to play that guy, when to platoon and everything like that, his advice at the offensive side of the game was terrible. He would have never gone up and said to Frank Robinson, I just want you to pull the ball, because Frank could hit it out anywhere. He never would go to Eddie Murray and say, I want you to pull the ball. No, because Eddie could hit home runs from both sides of the plate. So could Ken Singleton. So could Cal Ripken. They didn't get that advice. So Earl just looked at me and he said, listen, you know, you're 170 pounds, 170. You're not going to, you hit a few home runs and you'll be worth your weight to us, you know, because you can play some defense. But man, oh man, learning the game from the guys that I learned it coming up the ladder, I was so thankful that I played for 24 seasons at the major league level, because those last 12 years, you know, I go back to the Oakland A's and how powerful a team they really were, playing the Dodgers in 1988. And it was a mismatch. We were the worst World Series team on paper in history, and they were the strongest World Series team. We tore them apart for one reason. I could read a hitter. When Canseco and McGuire and those guys came up with that big open stance, they were looking for the ball middle in. When they came up pigeon-toed, they were looking for the ball middle away, just pitch them the other way. We beat them in 5 games, but I give that credit to the people that taught me how to read hitters and how to read pitchers and how to read game situation, that kept me in it till I was 43 years old.
So I really believe a professional league, and I'm going to tell you, if this were me and you said, Walter, draw it up for me, okay, it would be Canada, U.S., Mexico, Puerto Rico, and we would have teams essentially in that North American corridor.
Yeah.
And you would go from Montreal, and you would go to Vancouver, and you'd basically create a 30-team league, and you'd be traveling. You'd have the West Coast League, where you'd have everybody from Vancouver down to Mexico, the East Coast League, which would go from Montreal down into Georgia and Mississippi. I could almost guarantee you'd have 20,000 people in a stand every night. And I promise you, in the world we live in with Huddle and Peacock and Paramount and Apple TV, they want content. Oh, my goodness. I mean, that would be great content. And you would end up with guys. Do you remember Ricky Henderson playing in New Jersey? Sparky Lyle coached the team in the Atlantic League, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Ricky Henderson played in that league. So, you get these guys that I think I just read where the lefty that wants to come back, he pitched for the Phillies, and he's looking to come back into the game. Those would be the leagues that you'd want to have, and those guys would come back and they'd bring fans with them, and it would be wildly successful. And I know you'd have television offering you money for content. It would be no brainer. Yeah,
it's a conversation maybe you and I should talk about, because my thought would be you have a team for every state, and literally they could travel, in various ballparks across the state. I mean, you wouldn't have really a home team, but you'd be the state team, and you could break it down into Canada and Puerto Rico, all that. There's definitely, I think it's doable. It's something we should talk about. In fact, I'll be in touch with you shortly. But let's talk about your book real quick. Where can you be reached, and where can folks get the book?
Simply, I put the book out now. It's on Amazon, and I have people questioning me all the time about the whole book thing. I don't consider myself a writer. In 2020, a parent called me up and said, "There's no Little League. What do I do with my son?" And I was like, "Well, you can go out in the backyard and play catch, and you can get a broomstick, and I'll show you a bunch of drills." So it fascinated me that there wasn't enough, like what I call understanding of what to be able to do when you don't have an organized team to go play on. So that's where the book started. All of them were, I wrote Fun Over Fear for parents of 3 to 9 year olds. Don't worry about missing out. You're not missing out. Make it fun. Let them run. Let them have ice cream. Let them be with their friends. Don't worry about how good your son is or isn't at ages 3 to 9, as silly as that sounds. And then the process was literally from 10 to kind of 15, that freshman year in high school, was kind of an understanding of, as when we're talking to parents and you get them to understand at 10 years old, they're learning those dynamics of the game, the instincts of the game, the infield fly rules, the tagging up, the moving runners over, and that size and strength are important. And then I wrote the recruiting process to really get parents to understand the realities of what college coaches look for when they're really looking to make decisions. And the shift was just a way to offer an alternative narrative to youth baseball being the all-powerful. It's the Wizard of Oz. Youth baseball is the Wizard of Oz. When we get behind the curtain and we pull the curtain back, we look, it's green, just like it was in the Wizard of Oz, but it's money. And so I wrote the shift to tell parents it's a numbers game. That we have 3 million players playing in 6 to 13. We have 500, 600,000 playing 13 through 18. We have 60,000 playing college. And then professionally, we have just a couple of thousand players who are from the United States, because if you look at any other minor league rosters, they have Dominican academies. They have, they have academies all throughout Latin countries, and they have it for a reason, because they stockpile talent. So the chances of becoming a professional player, particularly a major league player, and that's what the shift is all about. Understand the rule. The game has changed. It's a game of musical chairs. It starts up top. They eliminated all these possibilities, and it's going to filter down to youth baseball. Parents just don't know it yet.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for joining us. But, gentlemen, that's all the time that we have for today. For all of us at the Prospect Blueprint, quote of the week from Ted Williams: "There's no excuse for hard work." For all of us, to all of you, have a good holiday season.